into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Detective Stapler is back.
Stapling the bad guys.
Stapling the bad guys, that's right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Law and Order episode 2021. You did it. You made it here. Give it up for yourselves.
Woo!
Everybody. Everybody at home. Everybody on the subway or
No,
their
give
car.
us a collective bum bum. Everybody do that
That's
right now. As you're watching,
We'll
as
wait.
you're listening.
Great. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pod Damn America. I am your host for the day, Alex Patak. I'm here with my deadly co-host,
Anders Lee here, deadly.
and the always formidable Leslie Lee III. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back, Alex. Once again, happy to be damned.
Always happy
Yeah.
to be damned. A thing that I'm going to start saying starting now. Because we have a rotation of catchphrases. I don't think any of them have
Right.
ever stuck. Have you guys ever covered Law and Order on your show before?
Yes, that was actually one of our earliest episodes. We kind of did a kind of a top-down overview of Law and Order with a few specific episodes. I think one of the episodes we did was the first kind of Black Lives Matter episode that they did. They've done several. They've actually changed their politics each time they've had to do like a episode, and sometimes now it's like multiple episodes or even season-long arcs where they're just kind of dwelling in police violence against black people and all that stuff. But we covered like the first one before they got woke, really, where it was just like where Olivia herself even was very much on the Blue Lives Matter side, but that
You'd
has
think
changed
she would be,
drastically.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It was realistic. It was a realistic portrayal, but in the intervening years, they've tried to make the show more politically conscious in a way that's completely fabricated and fictional, and not all representative of what the police actually are or do, which Law and Order never was. But I think there's certain points to be made to say that it's better that Olivia is a Blue Lives Matter person than Olivia to be a Black Lives Matter police captain. That's much more. I think that that lie is more offensive than
the
truth.
Law and Order admin, surprise, is pro Blue Lives. Could you believe it? She's not one of those high up cops who is constantly taking the side against the federal law enforcement. Yeah, so just to catch the listener up on what we're doing today we're talking about and digging our teeth into, what should I call this?
Spring madness. Or not madness.
No, what's the word I'm looking for?
I feel like there is...
It's an infamous episode, is what I'm saying. It's like the bad sheriff in town. This is the episode. This is the famous January 6th Law and Order episode. Because what they do is they reach into the headlines and they challenge you, the viewer, with the latest pickings of the day. And now they're going to tackle the Capitol unrest, despite the fact that this is a sexual violence themed show.
Yeah, they do manage to fit almost everything. Every major sensational news story ends up on SVU in one way or another. Even though the cops are specifically supposed to be dealing with crimes of sexual violence and violence against children, somehow they end up like dealing with terror cases, which is this one ends up being as well. Like that happens like fairly regularly. Anything about the war on terror, they did episodes on. And even stuff like Black Lives Matter, like that doesn't necessarily tie into what an SVU does, but they but they get every single racial twist on the case that they can get to shove in that that relevance. They get every celebrities who gets in the news for any kind of scandal, even and especially sex scandals, gets a SVU episode.
They're very Freudian in that sense. Sex is everywhere, so they're sexualizing every current event. I had some trouble understanding this episode because it's very heavy, as we were saying, on Law and Order lore. But I should know about it because I'm actually part of the Law and Order Extended Universe. I was in the Gamergate episode that came out.
Oh yeah, that's another thing they do.
In 2015, I had a key role. I was a gamer dude because I had a beard.
That's a lie. That's stealing valor. You are
I'm
not a gamer dude.
But
I want your goddamn
I
badge.
looked the part.
Wow, you were wearing gamer face. You went on SVU and you wore gamer face.
So it was supposed to be at a convention, right, for video games, and the way I psyched myself into it as an actor, I was looking at a stand where people were playing computer solitaire. That's how I worked it out in my head to where I could actually plausibly play the role. But my mug was on Law and Order for a half second, and I think I've told this story maybe on the bonus, but Ice-T was on that episode, and they did several takes, of course, and his line was, "These guys are not noobs." And I heard him say that like 15 times in a row, and it was great.
That is our word. You can't say that word.
Ice-T is a legitimate gamer. He's you can't say that word. You should have said the N word when repeating that story. You're right, absolutely right to call that out, Alex. You should have said Ice-T said the N word.
Well, wouldn't I be? Wouldn't that be me though? Wouldn't I be
No, you're not even in the game. You're not even in the game. You're not even in the game. A noob is a noob gamer. You're not a gamer at all. So.
You have to have ambition. You have to be striving for something.
All right. I mean, I have been playing,
especially with the rise of gamer bigotry. It's really shameful for you to do that. But yeah, that's another thing SVU does. They do that. They even Gamergate. They get an episode on just anything that's on the news that the interns who fetch their coffee are tweeting about. They somehow find a way to mix it in. They did an OnlyFans episode pretty recently as well, and they tried to be sensitive to the simp. At first they were one of the simps did it, and then Ice-T explains to him, actually these simps are actually just normal kind of people, that one of them was a couple, one was just a regular guy, and they visited all the simps to see who had hurt this woman who was on OnlyFans, and it turned out not to be any of the simps. So they tried to and if they had done that episode 10 years ago, it would the first 15 minutes would be Stabler or Benson or any of the beautiful, handsome detectives talking about how gross and disgusting these people are, and obviously they're perverts and should be locked up for something. But they have tried to be a little bit more on the ball, and they've grown and changed. So now when they do the porn episode, it's about how actually they're supporting sex workers, but they never would have done that. Sort of take 10 years ago. So the politics of the show do try to keep up and evolve. They're never good, but they change.
You've already cut into the main observation I had on this show, which is all of the cops are way too good looking. The women's hair is flowing like the wind in every scene when they're inside in an office, and the only reason my attention got drawn to this to begin with was people were tweeting about how Christopher Maloney, who plays Stabler, who's back this episode, baby. Stabler's back. His Detective Stapler, his ass has the Ren and Stimpy ass. He has the fist coming out of your butt ass, which I did not know was a real thing.
It just goes
until now.
Horizontally backward. It makes no sense. He must be wearing something.
It shoots an additional butt out of his ass.
But I agree with what you're saying about the politics of the show. It's they should just go full The Shield and just have them all be corrupt, reactionary bastards, instead of trying to do this middle ground of Well, black and blue lives matter. What happens if you mix black and blue?
Yeah. See, and that's the thing, right? Because this show does try to have it both ways, and Stabler's Return is a great example of this. Now, when Stabler was on the show, every so often he would get rough with a suspect, but it wasn't necessarily like he was a unhinged cop, especially early on. He's not necessarily supposed to be the macho, the stereotypical macho tough guy cop, because he works in sex crimes. Like, obviously the stereotypical macho, he has more of a sensitive side. He has a wife. He has several daughters that he dotes
those people
on.
are kind of a liability of the sex crimes team, I've found.
Yeah,
kind of scare everybody.
Well, in reality, that does happen. There's actually story like the New Orleans sex crimes unit was run by a man and a woman, and they just basically did not do anything. Like, any reports they got, they would just ignore, toss in the trash. So that does happen. But as far as Stabler goes, he would have these incidents, but like, he's a TV cop, so TV cops shoot a lot of people and kill a lot of people and get in a lot of fights, but he wasn't necessarily like a problem, because in the Law and Order universe, all that shit is justified. Every cop shooting is good. Every time they have to put their hands on a subject is justified. They never make a mistake. They never put an innocent guy in jail, at least for the first 10-15 years of the Law and Order universe. That progressively has changed, and then they changed Stabler's character, where his past incidents where, it's just a normal episode and he shoots a guy and no one cares. Then that becomes, oh, you shot a guy and now you have to go to therapy. Now you have to do this. Now we have to talk about it. Now it's a character arc that you killed somebody, and they ended up making that the reason he departed the show. And it's kind of like a retcon, because the show didn't start off in a world where it mattered if a cop shot somebody, he deserves it. That was what Law and Order was. If you went to jail, you deserved it. But they started changing. They went back on cases and said, actually, this person didn't do it, and we screwed up. They always are trying to kind of update it. But the problem becomes, like, still people love Stabler, and so Stabler's back. So it doesn't matter how many guys he shot. It doesn't matter, like, if he did like a mea culpa about his violence or recovered it. He's still like the very next, in the next hour, like, he's fighting the mafia. So now he, like, wherever we say about Stabler and his history of violence, he's a good guy. He's the good guy. He's on every Thursday at 9 p.m. or whatever. So, like, what did we reckon with? We didn't reckon with anything. We just said this guy is great, because it was much better to view Law and Order as like a sci-fi series where cops are actually good and villains are actually evil. It takes place in like an alternate timeline or whatever.
With
if you
the
look
same
at that,
news items. News items that we have, but in a different world.
Yeah, but like you said, when they bring in the news items and then try to make them integral to the show, where the cops themselves are commenting on what they think about Black Lives Matter, then it stops being a fantasy, and you're not really dealing with the copaganda that you've done earlier. You haven't really addressed it or changed it. You've just told us that, Stabler killed a bunch of guys, but it's okay. Like the same thing with Jack Bauer. They tried to put Jack Bauer on trial in like season 7, like a congressional hearing. But at the end of the day, like, Jack Bauer was right.
They had him standing up to Red
So-
Foreman, who was like a senator or whatever, and he was like, "Senator, you do not understand what it's like to have to save 1 million people in 5 minutes."
Jack
Yeah,
Power,
and-
are you sorry for saving my pussy ass?
Yeah, and so like in the in-universe explanation works out for that character. But it doesn't work in the real world. So when you bring the real world accusation into the fictional world, you're basically saying, like, it is okay and it is justified to do all this stuff because Jack Bauer, it was right. Stabler was right.
For Stabler to ever feel bad about anything he's done is an abomination against the entire format of the show. This show started in 1999. It's a procedural. It's called Law and Order. There's not supposed to be a part where they question whether there should be law. The part of the show is supposed to be like, I gotta head down to booking. That's a scene. Booking. And the entire tone of this is so confused. So in the 2000s, was this Did they like try to be harder about the cases? Did they rough up the suspects a little more? Or?
Yeah, and it was very black and white. And the thing was like, oh, these are the suspects that nobody's going to feel sorry for. These are the criminals that the cops can do whatever they want to. They can break all the rules. They can get because if you actually watch USA Network, they have all these ads of Stabler and Benson, and most of them are just about how goddamn angry they are about all these perverts that they have to catch and how they are advocates for the victims. So it's a very pure black and white narrative for cops. That's kind of what SVU is. Whereas something like the regular Law and Order did have, you know, a bit of a moral gray areas. Like, oh, you know, this guy did it, but he did it for like or a justified reason, or he comes from this sort of background. With SVU, they have moved in that direction a little bit more, but basically when you're hunting like pedophiles and rapists, like no one's going to be questioning like whether you read them their rights or anything like that. And when that does come up, it's presented as being absolutely ridiculous. Oh, this guy got on a technicality. How awful is it? There's a lot of SVU episodes in the early seasons like that. Like, god damn it, these sons of bitches have lawyers. And the presentation of the defense attorneys on SVU, which they've dropped off lately, was always very, very hostile. Obviously, because they're defending, you know, people accused of sex.
Some great European defense attorneys in this episode, though. Top-notch, shady Italian defense attorneys.
Oh, yes.
I remember it may have been Law and Order SVU. It may have been another cop show, maybe another Law and Order. There's like Criminal Intent for a while. I don't know what the distinction there was, but I remember...
That's the one for criminals. So the criminals
from the
Criminal Intent, just briefly, Criminal Intent was a Vincent D'Onofrio vehicle. Then Jeff Goldblum eventually did it. But it was supposed to be more like Sherlock Holmes. That was basically the idea. You would know who the criminal was in the beginning, and it would be these very complicated crimes, mostly committed by like psychiatrists or doctors, you know, like more high quality crimes for a high quality mind in a cop to find. And he was a very non-traditional cop, actually, and didn't
Italian.
get along with the bar.
But
the Iron Triangle.
It may have been that. It tracks if it was SVU, but I remember at least reading about, there was one episode in which a detective was interrogating a pedophile, and the pedophile had a victim like stowed away somewhere, and in order to get the info for where the kid
There's an
was,
exploding child underneath my vest.
but in order to get the info from the NAMBLA pedophile as to where the kid was, the detective promised him like 15 minutes with the kid once they find him. But then
the fuck?
they went back on it. He lied, but it was still like, this is scintillating gray area television here.
Yeah, I guess they really do deserve the boot.
Yeah.
Anything Stapler's got to do to get to the bottom of this one. So usually we do like a full recap of these, but I want to just like quickly go over the like plot points just for like 5 seconds, and we can get over to how like genuinely confusing watching this was. So we have the ageless police captain played by Mariska Hargitay, Detective Olivia Benson. Captain Olivia Benson? I've seen 3 episodes of this show.
I think she's a captain by now. Yeah, she's captain.
She should be. She definitely seems in charge, and she's
she's
her
definitely
old
in
flame,
charge.
Detective Elliot Stabler, who we find out was in Rome for years. All these years he's been gone, and it's because he's been the NYPD's man in Rome.
The meathead dipshit who got fired, more or less, is like in Rome. Like completely bizarre.
Do the NYPD really have people in Rome?
I don't know if they have them in Rome.
No, they do. Well, maybe not Rome, but they do have like an international unit. Yeah. They'll show up to other countries for like terror stuff, and the local law enforcement are always like, "What the fuck are you doing here? Go away!" They never contribute anything useful. Yeah. It's just some
Are
like
you part of the Law and Order TV show.
Yeah, it's just gonna be some like fat cop from Queens on vacation. Like, let me help. I don't speak the language, but I'm gonna poke around and like badger your witness in a language I don't understand.
That seems like a CIA like stash away job. Like, we need a guy just hanging out in Rome We'll
Yeah.
contact you when the time is right.
I mean, it sounds like a make-work job. It sounds like a mafia, like, no-show job for, like, you just get to travel someplace. You don't even have to
You
be
just
there.
go and take bribes. He should have been the bribe collector for the NYPD.
Yeah.
They couldn't trust him with the bribes. He kept roughing everybody up. And now he's back, Anders. He's back in New York City, and he's here with his wife. But she's tragically, first thing you see in the show, his wife has been exploded in an exploding incident. She went to go open her car door, and her car exploded. And they think it's something to do with these protesters downtown who are coded right-wing Capitol insurrection guys.
And her explosion is somehow a sex crime. I'm not sure how to pull that off.
Well, this time it's personal.
It was personal. See, this is how they brought it in. So his wife is actually kind of a long-running character on the show. She wasn't. I don't know if she was meant to be initially, but she eventually her and the daughters became bigger parts of the show. So seeing her back was also interesting too. And she's I think she goes on the Majority Report a lot. That
Really?
actress who plays her, she's pretty funny and interesting person. It was sad to see her get killed off.
It's a damn
after-
shame what happened
It,
to her
it
then.
was so yeah. So you do have like this is like a 22-year character arc that we've just seen completed. So her death was pretty like sad.
I want to
actually.
call in the next time she's on the Majority Report as Stabler. Be like, Howard, are you alive? How'd you get on my computer screen?
Now, I was enjoying it much more when I thought she was a character they were introducing this episode and then exploded and died. That was very funny for me.
Oh no, people have spent more time with her than they have their own children. Like she's a long running character. So it was a bit of emotional, but she hasn't been on the show for like 10 years and then a Stabler. So a lot of
She's
people
been in
probably
Rome.
a lot of people watch, and we didn't know that at all. Like that was new. I think actually they didn't they just didn't talk about where Stabler went for the most part because they weren't sure if he was going to come back ever. It's not like he left on bad terms. He just wanted to do something, different with his career and his life at the time. And so they always kind of left it open when on a lot of these shows, like they'll kill a character off when they leave the show, which I usually find more interesting, but they kept him around.
Right. Well, what happened is the character Stabler actually got his ass stuck in an escalator. And it was for 10
my
years
God,
he
can you
couldn't
imagine?
get this pointy ass out of the escalator.
That's the most upsetting visual I have ever conjured. Why
And
would
then
you
he gets
say
out of
that
that,
to
and
me?
then he gets stuck in the Suez Canal, and we all know what happened to that.
You're telling me I'm blocking world trade? Yeah, so that leads us into the meat of the episode, which is Detective Stapler does not work here, but he is going to get to the bottom of this crime using his personal contacts in the NYPD sex division. And so they're interrogating this like white rapper looking guy. He has like the shaved Nazi head on the sides, with the long hair on top. And
Right.
they interrogate him, and he's just been watching Alex Jones for 12 years or something, like 8 hours a day for the last decade.
right.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, his politics are like a mix. Like he's like Antifa and alt-right like in one. Or maybe I'm thinking of another guy, but it felt like he said a couple of things that sounded like he was very like it was like they were trying to get both characters in one.
It was like they're trying
And
to do a
they-
Boogaloo Boy, in a way.
No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, like
Leslie,
a
you've
book-
been fooled by the good folks at Law and Order. What was happening, and this does happen with the insurrection people, is they cover their asses by blaming Antifa
Right.
for stuff. So whenever they mention something exploding or going wrong, he's like, Antifa snuck in and did that. We have to break the law, but they're doing it wrong. And it's this really weird gray area. I feel like this is the most confusing part of the episode because you have these guys who are right-wing Law and Order people who are the target audience for the show when the show starts, and now they're the villains in the show. And no
Well,
one knows what to do with it.
Well, I think that's a mistake. Law and Order is not for right wingers. Law and Order SVU is for like women.
Right.
Like that's who watch these shows. I love these shows, and the reason I watch these shows because my mom watched these shows. Like the majority of these shows, the Law and Order, the CSIs, is women. It's not really a political thing. It's just like the cop story, and this is why there's so many of them. It's actually the copaganda comes in with them, but I don't know if the point I don't know if the point of why there's so many of these shows is to make propagandas, because making an hour long show about a cop story is very easy to do on a regular basis, and you can make very interesting and riveting television that certain demographics will like and can watch over and over again, and that's why SVU and Law and Order and CSI are playing on any 5 networks you have at any given time. It's just a really like the cop story. It's just so pure. It's good versus evil in the fictional sense, obviously not in the real world, but it's a very good versus evil story. There's mystery. There's intrigue. You're trying to figure out what's happening, what's going on, and whether the truth even matters at the end of the day. A lot of Law and Order episodes, they figure out who done it, but they can't prove it, or they can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in court, and they have to sit and live with that. That's also good storytelling too. It's just a very easy thing to do, and you don't need a bunch of special effects. You just need like a couple of rooms and like some ties and like a coffee machine, and you have a cop show.
Ties. I mean, and that's what happens in the show too. Is you want to stay with this fun insurrection dude, but actually he's been made up. He's been set up by the goddamn Italians, and then the rest of the episode they're chasing these guys from the Iron Triangle, which is either Albanians or Italians or Greeks. I didn't get the third part of the triangle, but it's somebody's doing something over there, and you got to be mad at them about it.
That's like a fictional place, right? That they made up for the Law and Order universe.
Yeah, Albania is part of the Law and Order universe.
The wag the dog situation. No, but wait, because I know they make up. They make up like crime families, and did they not make that up? I thought it was like that country in the DC universe that they always reference in the Middle East.
They have a couple actually. DC has a few. They have what is it? Kandak maybe is one of them, I think. Yeah. But so this episode, when you messaged me about doing this episode, Alex, I knew you would kind of be disappointed in the actual 1/6 content, because that's just a red herring. This is not a true ripped from the headlines episode. They do this sometimes too, where they will rip the premise, the red herring from the episode, from the headlines, but then go and do like a regular topsy-turvy Law and Order show with twists and turns. This is definitely it. If 1/6 had not happened, it would be this exact same episode, but the car bomb would just not have been 1/6 guys. It would have been just straight up Antifa guys. That's
Antifa
just
guys. Like Middle America understands Antifa guys by this point. Like they get the character. You had the feeling when this guy was on screen, they're like, "We don't know what to do with you.
Yeah,
you didn't even do it."
It's too.
It's confused.
Yeah, it was too fast, too soon, and even then, like the real point of this episode is to bring Stabler back, and then launch his show, which does not mention 1/6 at all, obviously, even though it's the second part of this episode.
Important question: are Detective Stabler's children in most of the show? Because they kept showing up independently as adults to hug their dad, and I was like, this is weird behavior for adult characters.
Oh yeah, they're mostly children before. This is our first time seeing them as adults too, so they're coming back as well. And I don't know if they all like remain actors or anything like that. So
I hope they come back. They can really hug a dad.
Interesting.
You know how to make TV that way. But yeah, I think what you were getting onto earlier is really important, which is that this is a show that is about cops, but is not expressly for the purpose of propaganda. It like has some in it.
A lot.
But that's not
By
the
virtue
point.
of, Well, it's interesting because I remember watching an interview with Mariska Hargitay. I hope I'm saying that right. And
Great pronunciation.
Thank you.
From the fictional country of Albania.
But she says that sometimes she gets pulled over for speeding, and the cops always like let her out of it because they recognize her from Law and Order. So it's like they view what they're doing as like a service to the public, or as like, oh, you're portraying us as the good guys.
Representation of blue lives.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and it does so much to just warp how you think about the real world and crime, because the propaganda is not explicit. You just think you're watching a show, but then if you watch this show for years and decades, you're going to come across with some beliefs about like cops that just aren't true, like the idea that cops stop crime, like that the cops are good at solving crime, like especially SVU. My God, like what would a realistic episode of Law and Order SVU be that was actually like a real sex crimes unit? It would be images of rape kits sitting in an empty office being untested. SVU, they get their DNA test results. The speed right now is about an hour. About an hour seems to be how
People in the
fast they
lab
get
do
their
great stuff. Shout out to them.
Yeah, that lab team is the most efficient lab team that's ever existed. Like I said, it's a sci-fi show. When in reality, and SBU actually had to did ads about this. Marissa Harkey, like sometimes they done ads about how actually the cops suck at testing rape kits and not solving and not even looking into these crimes, which is the first thing they do in every episode. So if you watch SVU and then you hear, wait a minute, if I'm assaulted and I go through this horrific procedure, they might not even test it for years, if not months, even if there are other attacks in my area from someone with the same MO. Like that, most people wouldn't believe that if I told them that, because they've seen SVU.
Right. Just a realistic portrayal would be like half the episode dedicated to figuring out what she was wearing at the time.
Yeah.
I'm curious if they handle at all the Duke lacrosse scandal back in the day.
Yeah. There's a Duke lacrosse episode. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I've seen it at least 4 or 5 times, but I couldn't tell you where they came down on it, what the tone they struck was. But there is definitely, and I even think I think there's a SVU and there's a Law and Order, and I think the Law and Order would probably be the one that's more offensive. I think that came earlier. I think the SVU one came fairly a bit after,
and if they done
the actual case,
they've done Epstein.
They make like
right?
3 of these a day, dude. They have one for everything.
Yeah. Oh, they've done Epstein. Epstein, I think, was the last season. It was a pretty fun episode.
Okay.
Weird to say about something about Epstein, but it was one where they were just like you can clearly tell they were kind of having fun with the premise and the rip from the headlines. They really they did a good, pretty interesting Epstein.
And did they have him
Detective
get
Stabler
suicided?
came back from Little St. James Island.
I think he just went on trial. It was kind of boring, but they mentioned Epstein in the episode. So this is another weird thing about their ripped from the headlines thing. They almost always, like, you'll be watching SVU. You'll see them like, no way are they doing this. No way are they doing this story. And they're doing it. And then 5 minutes into the episode, Ice-T will come and name drop the real story of the case. Like, hey, this murder is just like what happened to Jeffrey Epstein, huh?
It's like you're in his dream, and he's like kind of like catching you up on what's been going on in the real world and the fake world at the same time.
It's the most bizarre thing, because some of these things are like so unique, like they don't happen twice, you know. But in SVU, crime always happens twice.
Yeah, and the people who make these shows, this is the confusing part. So the you can believe the rumors on this one. Hollywood is full of liberals for the most part.
Yeah.
Right? Like the people who make this show are liberals. And you got to wonder, like, watching it, like how many of them actually are pro cop at this point? Like Ice-T is on this show.
Yes, yeah. It is a job. It is a gig. And Dick Wolf is generally known as a liberal. The type of liberal we hate, of course, but one that's like in good standing in Hollywood. I don't think he's
paid.
Yeah, I don't think he's really known as being like a super far right guy, but he did get criticism a little bit for hiring Fred Thompson who is a Republican, but he pushed back on that. I think somebody may be able to look up the articles, but from what I recall, the pushback was that liberal Dick Wolf hires Republican firebrand Jim Thompson. This is the proof that maybe we're in a post-partisan world or something. It was framed in very West Wingian terms, even though he did get criticism for it, but the criticism wasn't that Dick Wolf, you're a right winger. It was Dick Wolf, why are you inviting a Republican in? Why are you giving him a job? And without people noticing that actually, like, Law and Order itself is extremely, extremely right wing on certain issues, like the idea of the hero district attorney, which Dick Wolf pioneered. Right, he did pioneer this. Most of the shows before this were about defense attorneys, you know, like people getting people off, or you do have the cop shows, but Dick Wolf did invent the ultra heroic, uncorruptible Jack McCoy, one of the most noble characters that's ever been portrayed on screen, and he's a district attorney who never ever wavers in his quest for truth, justice, and fairness.
Well, I remember watching what's his name? Dick Wolf, for the first time. It was very surreal experience to see, like, the actual guy, because I didn't have cable growing up, so I'd watch Tavis Smiley every night, and he was on the Tavis Smiley show once, and the first thing he says, like, Tavis Smiley was, I don't know what he's doing now, but he had a show on PBS for a while. He was kind of like a DJ guy, and he's a pretty talented interviewer. But they had Dick Wolf on. The first thing Dick Wolf says is, "What I usually hear is that I ruin people's sex lives when they see me." And then, because he's promoting...
Don't say that into a camera.
But he was promoting, like, an HBO special he was doing about the Trail of Tears and about, like, American genocide. And Tavis Smiley used the term Native American, and I always remember Dick Wolf was like, "I am shocked at the political incorrectness on the Tavis Smiley show. The term is American Indian, not Native American," which is like just such a weird thing for like a TV producer, like, wealthy old white guy to like get up in arms about.
Chad Dick Wolf tears apart liberal Tavis Smiley in 5 seconds with logic.
Yeah, he was a liberal for the 80s, but I don't think his politics have really grown. Even though the show has done a better than I would expect job of updating, even especially with that first Black Lives Matter episode, which was very anti-Black Lives Matter, more or less, but it did portray like Olivia's kind of like a villain as like the antagonist too, in a weird way. It was very confused. But I think they are trying to they're trying to make the politics better. But again, since it comes in this cop format, the problem is the cops. The problem is this is a show about the most noble, greatest cops in the world, so it doesn't matter like how woke you are, or if you know all the right terms, which they do, or if they do a lot. They've done episodes about LGBTQ issues, a lot of episodes. They've been very pro LGBTQ, but at the end of the day, it's still a bunch of fucking cops chasing down people. They've even gone so far. The last episode they did, maybe 2 episodes ago, was called "Welcome to the Pedo Motel," right? And
that's the name of it.
That's the name of the episode, and they've covered this on Law and Order SVU before, but in a very different way, where sex offenders end up having to live in one place, because in one building usually, because this is the only place that will accept them, and that's usually considered like a good thing in the world of SVU. But this latest episode, they actually do question, like, what is this really how we operate? Is this just punishment? What are these men supposed to do if they're not allowed to reintegrate into society? Right. And then one of the central people was someone who was convicted of a sex crime, but it was a black guy, and this was a rip from the headlines thing, and I think they've done this more than once. The black guys who get charged with sex crimes by their white girlfriend's father, even though their ages are like they go to school together, and they had that, so they really tried to like even their portrayal of like pedophiles, they tried to, in a weird way, soften it with this last episode and kind of at least open up the possibility that, even though we've been saying we should be like shoot these people on the street, which the cops do say in the early seasons, like we should just put these people in the ground. And now we're moved to the point where actually, you know what, we need to be talking seriously at least about how we reintegrate these people. So it changes.
There's a scene in this fucking episode where Detective Stabler is left alone with the guy he thinks murdered his wife for 5 minutes and then almost punches him, and then the whole show stops and looks at the camera and is like, there are rules.
Yes.
We can't just go willy-nilly on...
How fucking confusing would you be? Imagine if you were on a desert island and all you had was 22 episodes of Law & Order SVU with you. What would you think was happening in the world? What changes have been made? How confused would you be by the end? Because in the first seasons, you're being pedos up, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't do that. You can't even threaten to do that, Stabler. What the hell is wrong with you?
And this one murdered his wife.
Yeah.
It's like the one maybe good excuse you have to punch a guy.
Like there's actual episodes where they literally get people killed, like innocent. I remember there was one episode in particular. They think this guy did it, and they're so nasty to him. Stabler and Benson, they were the lead detectives on the case, and they were like, "You did it. We did. We know you did. We're going to keep you. We're going to get you in prison, and you're going to be raped in prison." They used to say that a lot too. They don't say that
when
anymore.
we say raped, we mean raped in the way it's okay to say in 1999.
And that did happen, and he was killed. And then at the end of the episode, we find out that he was innocent, and it was just like, oh well, we're mad at the woman who lied about him, and not like the cops aren't culpable or anything like that. And I think years later, this was very interesting. This is a very interesting reckoning. This guy who was innocent was sent to jail. Actually, I take that back. I don't know if he was innocent or not. But Olivia did say to him that when you get to prison, you're going to be assaulted because they don't like pedos there, right? And that did happen. And he thought that she had literally hired guys to do it to him. And so he like goes around like killing people she knows as revenge for her hiring guys.
This is dark 2 p.m. television.
Yes, really. And these episodes do air at any hour of the day. It's absolutely wild. But yeah, and then he goes and he kidnaps all these people. And when he's talking to her and he's like, I'm going to kill you, he explains to her like why he's doing this. And then she looks at him and she says, I am so sorry for saying that to you. I never should have said that. I never would have.
In retrospect, my bad.
Yeah, my bad. And he's like, after he's already killed like 5 innocent people, and I think he even killed like a kid who like knew Olivia. Like it was really like like dark revenge, like a really extreme revenge sort of thing. That's another thing. SVU takes place on multiple ontological levels. Sometimes you're supposed to look at this as a grim and gritty cop show with real people. Sometimes it's like a superhero show where someone you screwed over, 5 seasons ago returns and kills your boyfriend. Like you can't always take everything as seriously, even though it gets some very violent and dark stuff. But sometimes it just gets completely ridiculous.
Watching that, I mean, it sounds like it's always been kind of over the top, because in the way you want TV to be, so that's good. That you have the wrongly accused sex criminal murdering children, and then that's drama, sure. But watching this now has a weird feeling like you're just like witnessing an outdated technology, because the liberal created universally enjoyable cop show seems really out of place when you're watching it, and then you go to Twitter on the next tab on your computer because you're watching it on your computer because it's 2021, and there's like 4 high-profile cop murders at the same time. Yeah. To the point where, like, in terms of the kind of feel-good feeling they're probably pursuing when they make this kind of thing, while reinforcing the status quo and re-upholding all of the structures that you're supposed to feel comfortable with and make you feel good watching TV, all that stuff seems like it's much better accomplished by, like, superhero shows at this point. Well, like they're much more capable copaganda in terms of what they're the like effect they're having on you, the viewer, because you are not looking at them and being like, oh shit, they have a gun. This reminds me of the guy I saw earlier.
I mean, Alex, the perfect example of this is Watchmen, which
Right.
which is a cop show, but it has that layer of superhero dumb, and people were like, "Wow, this is like pro-abolitionist almost," because the cops are bad and the superheroes are cool, but the superheroes are literally all like detectives, which is a neat trick that actually a lot of copaganda plays, where all right, street cops are bad. But detectives are smart. They know what they're doing. They're only investigating the crimes that matter, which is, kind of how SVU starts, right?
Right. Your mind is always like, well, if I was murdered by a psycho pedophile on a revenge highway, I would want them to be taken to justice by a gumshoe afterwards. So I guess this one's all right.
Well,
Or if you were targeted by a murder robot from the future, of course you're going to want a Captain America or a Tony Stark out there
Get
helping
rid of
you.
that murder robot.
right. Well, so that's something that I've wrestled with a lot, I guess. As like I'm not a gamer, as we've established, but I'm a lifelong fan of comic books, and like the question of are superheroes fundamentally reactionary, I think is one that's hard to answer, but it feels like they kind of are in a way. I mean, David Graeber had this theory about superheroes is that for the most part they are status quo saving, right? They don't actually build a different world or better world. They're just kind of keep the equilibrium going. But
Yeah, that's what supervillains do.
right, but then again, yeah, they're living in the superhero universe. There are constantly people that we don't have in our reality who are supervillains who are constantly trying to destroy things and like blow up the world in a way that just human beings have not really been able to accomplish anything like. So in that sort of setting, it seems like we need superheroes, but at the same time, are there heroes like Green Arrow? I just read Through the Wreckage by Judd Winnick. I really enjoyed. Can there be superheroes like Green Arrow who actually are fighting the ruling class and the evil elements in our society who are not just villains or maybe are colluding with the villains? Can there be, I guess, a leftist superhero? Is that even a possibility?
I mean, not really. Depending on, because at the end of the day, like if you're trying to change the world for the better, that just makes you a villain. Like if you're saying I have this power and I'm going to try to change things, like if I'm going to change the status quo, you're a villain. I think Neil Guy, of course, has been explored a lot in comics, but Neil Gaiman did this with Miracle Man, where he, stops the supervillains, and then he's like, actually, I'm going to now make the world a better place. And they didn't finish the story, but it was clearly going on the path where now he's a totalitarian ruler. Superman Red Sun,
Yep.
Empire by Mark Waid, I believe. Tons of comics have gone this path, and almost always, like anybody trying to make the world a better place with using their powers to make the world a better place, or to empower people who aren't currently in power, ends up being treated as a supervillain, which is a little bit happened in the real world and realistically. I think because I was watching Invincible, which the Amazon cartoon adaptation today, and what that show, and I will recommend it. It gets pretty good by the second or third episode. The first one's pretty bad, especially because it makes very clear that if you are someone who gets superpowers one day and your first instinct is to go and pummel some human beings to protect a bank, you're a piece of shit. And that describes 99.999% of superheroes. No one would ever do that. No good person would ever think like that.
There was one guy who did that in real life last year during the Black Lives Matter protests who showed up at a bank to fight everyone with his nunchucks. Remember him?
Yeah.
And then he got beaten to a pulp in 5 seconds, and we all laughed about it for like 6 months. That's the closest you can get to that mindset, I think.
Well, I think someone else got a bit closer. I know it's a little bit later in the show notes, but someone like a Kyle Rittenhouse. What did he think he was doing other than what a superhero is doing?
Yeah, and then especially the fact that not only what did he think he was doing in terms of like upholding law and order, but the treatment he gets from the public for doing it probably means we're going to be seeing more Kyle Rittenhouses this year, or if not this year, in the future.
Yeah, and the public support seems a lot like the public support that, I don't know, Spider-Man gets.
Well, but there are a
as
lot
a
of
vigilante,
versions though
you know?
where the public is against, especially with Marvel, against Spider-Man, or they think these.
Or, it depends. It depends on the presentation.
Yeah.
But when those type of heroes are those street level heroes who are going out and saving people, or Daredevil, I don't know if Batman doesn't get as much. DC world is a little bit different than the Marvel world, so the presentation is a little bit different. DC is much more of like a sci-fi fictional universe, where Marvel tries to takes place in New York City. But Punisher, obviously a lot of people inspired by Punisher who think they are superheroes because they're cops and they're going around and they're fighting crime, which is what superheroes do.
Yeah.
At least in their defense, they're really good at letting you know they're inspired by the Punisher by putting it on every item they own and maybe their own bodies. Yeah, that also, Andrews, what you were saying really dives into the trick superhero movies and comics play, right? Which is that, you'll have the psycho who's going to go beat people up, but they always have that one rule where they will stop short of killing people. And then it's like, you swung a man on a web you made from your hands into a concrete wall at 20 miles an hour. How is it realistic you're not killing anyone?
Right. Well, they're also superpowered, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think, and there are many versions where Green Arrow, probably my favorite superhero, might have something to do with my complexion and hair color. There are versions where he is just of cop, but there are some.
Ice-T coming out of the pod damn show notes and going, he's simping for Green Arrow. He thinks he can turn this world around.
I'm just saying, there are some where he's where Oliver Queen becomes mayor of Star City and he's fighting developers, and that's the main plot point. But that is one version of Green Arrow. Within many others, and yeah.
Well, there's an HBO show right now that isn't
The Boys.
I don't know the name of it. Leslie, you'd probably do it. That's supposed to be the two communist superheroes, but they're just being cops.
That's Watchmen.
No. Are you
talking about The Boys? No.
Or you're communist cops. Are you talking about the fictional where? There was an Amazon show that was supposed to take place.
Oh yeah, that one's really good. It's it's interesting because what they did was these are actual scripts that were written in, I think it was an Eastern Bloc country. I don't know if it was the Soviet Union.
Oh, Comrade Detective.
Comrade Detective. Yeah.
Is that what you mean, Alex?
No. There's.
But that is a good point though, because Comrade Detective is an interesting show because it's communist propaganda in this, which is not to knock it, right? But the scripts were written in the 80s to sort of do an Eastern version of American cop shows that are pro-communist. And so what they did was they took all the dialogue and just reshot it, so it has this sort of self-aware but chintzy feel to it. It's a really fun show. It's just kind of bizarro cop show.
Who's Captain America's ward? The guy in the Avengers inherits the title.
Oh, Bucky.
Oh, Winter Soldier and
Winter Soldier. Doesn't he have his own TV show right now?
Yeah. Oh, they're supposed to be communists?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I think so. I was counting on you to know about this.
No, he's not a communist.
All week on my other podcast.
Oh, in fact, So, in fact, in Winter Soldier, actually, he is a white guy who was friends with Captain America before the war. He ends up getting frozen with him. They were sidekick. He was this Captain America sidekick. He gets frozen. In the Baltic Sea or something. Russia finds him and turns him into a super soldier too. And then he spends decades as a assassin for the secret Hydra KGB or whatever. I think that's mostly it. But no, he's not a communist. He's not no, he was kidnapped by the communists and turned into an evil experiment.
Right.
He was brainwashed by AOC videos into acting outside of his rational interests.
Yeah, and Falcon is just Uncle Tom anyway. So, there's no points to Falcon. Although there is an interesting scene that...
I regret bringing this up. I'm way out of my depth.
but there is a funny scene where at the end of Endgame, Captain America hands Falcon the shield and is like, all right, you're going to be a new Captain America. And from what I remember, they promoted the show was supposed to be Captain America and Winter Soldier because Anthony Mackie was supposed to be the new Captain America. At some point, this changed where he is the show is no longer about him becoming Captain America. It's or being the new Captain America. It's about maybe sort of him proving himself worthy, or Bucky proving himself worthy to be the next Captain America. So he's not the new Captain America. It's some random. It's a deep plot. It doesn't really matter.
Why would they bring in another guy?
But they did change what they promised, which is the Black Captain America, to this different show. But there is one scene where they justify it in the show where Bucky says, we didn't know what we were doing when we asked a black man to wear that shield. That Captain America red, white, and blue shield. There's a lot of history behind that, and they're basically saying like he's kind of he's turning down the shield because America. They don't say this, but America just has such a troubled history, and I just as a black man couldn't in good conscience take up
this is
the shield.
Infuriating to hear about secondhand. Do you know that? Like completely outside of the superhero world about it, you could just picture the Hollywood executives being like, we can't give a black man the shield. Dear God, there will be riots. Well, we're going to bring in a new guy. Everyone will love it. Fuck that. It's so confusing.
Well, they kind of what they call a lampshading it. So the white Captain America in the show is actually probably going to turn out to be a villain. So you're supposed to hate him. So like they give you like they don't do. Like it's very easy for them to kind of work both sides of it. Like, no, we don't have a black Captain America, but if you're angry about that, you can get angry at the villain in the show and not.
But
us.
America is not the great Satan. That is not what we are saying here on Disney Plus.
But I feel like I've heard this recently because growing up, I always thought of Captain America as sort of like the jingoist reactionary superhero. But I've heard that there's some portrayals where it's not necessarily like, saying that he is not that way, but he's at least portrayed in a light that is a little more nuanced or sort of tries to reconcile America's imperial past or present.
Yeah, there are actually a number of stories of that. That's actually old hat Captain America storytelling at this point from 60s, 70s. They've always reckoned with this. But as far like, and it's worth pointing out like Captain America in the comics spends most of his time like fighting like space lizards, like
or encased in ice, just frozen for decades.
Or he gets turned. He got turned into a werewolf. He got turned into a werewolf. That was my first Captain America comic. So a lot of the comic book stuff is really silly and doesn't really engage with the politics. Why is he called Captain America? Why does he wear an American flag? Because that's the name of the character, and this is the next issue, and we're using the same character. That's the justification for most of it. Some comics do try to grapple with this, but then a lot are just like he's out in space helping Punisher fight Dormammu or whatever.
Right.
This is all just to say I think Hollywood has found a much more digestible slurry for cop ideology in the superhero shows than in cop shows right now because they're a bit too triggering for people when they look out. There's literally helicopters going over my apartment while I watch this shit. Yeah. It's not what I want to be watching. So I guess the question I have is, Law and Order has been on for SVU's been on for 22 years. They're still making new Law and Orders. There's a new one that just came out that's called like Order of Law or something.
Oh, it's a organized crime, Law and Order, organized crime.
Really?
Starring
the
Stabler.
one crime we must stand against.
The one that's still so pervasive. That's the number one issue.
Coded white crime.
Well, the one that's bad and nobody complains about, and let me tell you, the one that they have in their pocket that they've been trying to develop for a couple of years. Well, they've been trying to figure out a way to put it out for a couple of years. It's called Law and Order Hate Crimes. How good will that be? How good will that be? Every week, the cops helping black people, helping LGBTQ people, helping women, helping our Jewish people, our Jewish friends. Every single week, Law and Order tackling hate crime.
What are they gonna
showing with cops? What the real work that cops are doing out there.
What are they gonna do after like the 10th?
A rainbow coalition.
After the 10th episode, they're like running out of like identities. Like Mennonites are being bashed. That's
Nobody talks about Ice-T is just also in this show. You call yourself a Mormon? What does that mean? I am wondering like what direction the cop shows are going to be taking for the next 10 years, because like the world is going to keep accelerating, but TV is going to stay the same, and I want to know what weird form that's going to take.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's going to be more anti-hero shows. At least I would hope so. True crime, I don't think is going away anytime soon. Like I hate cops, but I still love watching like Richard Ramirez.
I want to see them catch the Night Stalker.
Oh,
yeah.
True
I saw
crime
that show on Netflix where they catch the Night Stalker. It's like, you got to catch this Night Stalker.
That's a great one.
Is it? Because I started watching it, I didn't enjoy it because that one actually I think focused too much on the cop. The best true crime documentaries and stories don't focus on the cop. Some of them might focus on an FBI profiler. Yeah. I think the FBI agents are kind of interesting. From John, I've read 5 of his books, and I figured his Blake was too many Johns. John Douglas, and he's the basis for Jack Crawford and Silence of the Lambs. And Manhunter. Manhunter is based. Right. The Netflix series is based on his books, and I've been devouring his books, and it's very interesting because he's not really a cop, and the way they portray the FBI people on all these shows is completely fake. They don't go out and solve crimes and arrest criminals. They don't go out and hunt serial killers. They get files from the local sheriff, local departments, and then they read them and give them like advice, right? And then they're only dealing with murders and serial sex crimes and stuff. So that kind of true crime, from that level, you don't run into the problems when you're reading something by David Simon, where his detectives are like busting down doors of black people and like putting guns up to their heads in the course of their duties. For some reason, David Simon thinks those types of cops are the good cops. I say maybe the only type of good cop is the FBI guy who just sits in does research on like masturbation and then like
the FBI cops assigned to podcasts.
Cops assigned to podcasts, and the ones who send letters to the department saying actually the person who's doing all these crimes is probably not the black guy, innocent black guy you arrested, which he does actually do and talk about in his books. Like sometimes he'll get a case with somebody from these cops and be like, there's no way this guy did this. What the fuck are you talking about?
Dude, this is what I'm saying. You might enjoy the Night Stalker one just from how clearly they take these two cops' word on everything they say. Because they have around 3 episodes setting up the Night Stalker like, he shot this old woman dead and then had sex with her body. And then episode 4 is just people making up shit. They're like, I had him in the back of my car and I turned around and I said, listen here, you nice son of a bitch. I'm going to put you in a cage.
Well, but the reason I like the Night Stalker, and it was kind of hard to get into like the first couple episodes. But what I liked about it is it goes into sort of the bureaucracy. And Dianne Feinstein actually makes an appearance.
I heard about that part.
What's fun about it is like the clashing that happens between police departments and city governments and just different bureaucracies double-crossing each other and screwing up each other's intel and shit like that. And then also, the profiling of Ramirez and figuring out who he is.
They did not have nearly enough about him in there. They had just one snippet where they're like, oh, and by the way, as a child, his parents used to take him to the graveyard and pretend crucify him. Anyway, that's when we decided to check the steakhouse. And it was like, what the fuck was that part?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what Ramirez's case showed, and a lot of them showed, there's a one about the Night Stalker in what they call the Night Stalker in Australia, where just
the Night Stalker.
like they have a couple. Sometimes they reuse names, but whenever people talk about police abolition, the first response, well, what do you do about serial killers? And then the question you really should ask is, what do cops do about serial killers? Because cops are actually not very good at catching people who murder strangers. That's just not who attack strangers. That's just not how cops work. Unless like you live with the person, like there's probably a 90% chance you're going to get away with the murder, more or less.
Right.
They
Like,
literally do not catch the Night Stalker. They put his photo out, and then a bunch of guys in the neighborhood are like, "Isn't that the Night Stalker?"
Literal community policing.
Pretty much every serial killer case, and then even the FBI profiling unit, which in the TV shows are portrayed as mind hunters who get into the minds of the killer and they psychically find him. What his advice every time is, put out information to the community. They will find this person. I tell the community about this person, but the cops don't want to do that because a lot of times they don't want to do the work because these investigations are incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult. And if you don't know what you're doing, which is the majority of cops, you get a lot of bad press and a lot of bad attention because someone is just going around hurting and murdering people and nothing is happening because cops aren't actually equipped to do this sort of thing. It's the community that solves like the vast majority of these crimes, or just physical evidence, which is not like a cop doing research or detective work or doing really anything. It's just like science.
If you listen to true crime shows, it inevitably always gets to this point where they're like, well, there was a heyday of serial killing from the 1950s to the 1970s. And then for some reason, there was no more serial killing. It's like, yeah, we have fucking cameras.
Right. DNA.
You literally cannot get away with it.
Well, I think part of it is a multiple factors. People have been saying it's moved to shooting. People are saying the crime in general has gone down a lot, and people have speculated because we stopped putting lead in our fucking pipes.
That's Jake's theory, by the way. I have to give him
also why he thinks Joe Biden is the way that he is, which is hard to argue with.
Jake thinks Joe Biden is the Night Stalker.
But there's another great, pretty good Netflix one, the Ripper. Which takes place
that's who I was talking about. That's who I meant, actually, the Ripper.
Right, because in that one, it's like someone in Britain is killing sex workers. Oh, so it's just like Jack the Ripper. He must have a thing for sex workers and killing sex workers. But as it turns out, that's just who is easiest to kill because no one gives a fuck about them.
Yeah. And the cops didn't know this stuff. Yeah. The cops don't know this stuff. So like this idea that the cops are the ones who can protect you from that sort of, no, they're like absolutely alpha at any, like the guy in California, the Golden State rapist.
Yes,
who was a cop,
right?
Who was a cop, attacked
extremely relevant.
Probably 100 people, over 100 attacks.
I mean, this is all just not even to mention that the fact like we don't have serial killers now, but whenever you see a violent crime, I'd say like it feels like 1 in 5 is a cop.
Yeah.
The point where it's like, stop training these people how to kill, and then we'll have less murderers.
My theory that you need to do a massive study to test was that because of the internet, most of these killers are driven by this sense of they're inadequate, they're isolated, they're extremely misogynistic for the most part. I feel like with the advent of the internet, those people actually just find other people like them and they can talk to them and commiserate, when before, if you would only live in like this solitary world by yourself, where you're just building up this world where everybody is against you and you hate everyone and everything is against you. Now you can go on 4chan and you can talk this out openly and people will be like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, yeah, like, so that was my kind of theory, that we might see less serial killers now because these people with these anti-social behaviors are just on Twitter harassing you instead.
Or
because they can discuss their theories on Berserk.
Some of them, though, are
yes.
egged on by the hate that, like Luca Maldonado, who, the more attention he got from people saying like, no, don't kill that cat, the more it would influence him to. Yeah, I won't give away. Don't fuck with cats, but that's a good series.
I think the cat? You'll have to read about it to find out. Leslie brought up the one part of SVU that I think was the most eye-catching for me, and I would be remiss not to mention they do almost bring up the cops beating their wives thing for a second.
Oh,
this
really?
episode.
Oh, I think they do. Yeah, they do mention it. Is the husband? Could it be the husband?
Well,
Yeah.
It was Stabler, because Stabler's gone, and then he comes back, and there's a second where the captain character, Mariska Hargitay, is like, he was gone, and he was violent, but I loved him anyway. And it was like, are we just going to, like, allude to stuff you didn't even have in the show before?
I know,
just
right?
because we found out about it?
Yeah, the way she talked about him in this episode was very strange because she's never talked about him like that before. She absolutely loved and adored him and was very supportive of him and wanted him and didn't want him to go and leave the force. But now she's kind of like, well, he was kind of fucked up, but like that was strange. Like they are like rewriting their own history.
Yeah.
Well,
I know we did 400 episodes together, but in the 2 seconds off camera, he beat me, and I just didn't want to bring
that
it up.
actually would be a good Law and Order series. It's like Law and Order Internal Affairs, like someone trying to actually discipline fellow cops and just like running into hazards.
That will air right after Hate Crime.
They usually
It's gonna be
do
the
one.
most exciting hour of your day.
They usually do one IA episode a year as like a quota. There's one bad cop episode.
The Bad
a
Apple
year.
Ep.
Yeah, there's a Bad Apple Ep in basically every season. One. Sometimes they do pretty long arcs too, depending on how they feel. But that has been a staple. So that was how they covered themselves before, where it's like, oh, this is the cop who beat something. I think there's even an episode where
found him.
Where Stabler, yeah, exactly, where Stabler's teaming up with Anthony Anderson. Anthony Anderson, he's teaming with Anthony Anderson, and Anthony Anderson is just too high octane. He's like shoving guys down in the lockers and stuff. And Stabler's like, hey man, cool it. We don't do it like that here over at Sex Crimes. What the fuck are you doing, man?
Your time in the Outback has changed you, Anthony Anderson. Well, that, I think, rounds out most of what I wanted to get to for the cop episode. COVID is over. The violence has returned. We're going to be talking about cops a lot, probably for the next 6 months. So get excited for that. The only other thing we wanted to get to, Anders, do you want to catch the audience up on the Chauvin trial?
Yeah, so I've been watching most of the proceedings. It's gonna, the closing arguments are on Monday. I don't know how long it's going to take the jury to deliberate. But one thing that I've been intrigued by is the witnesses. They have a tactic. I feel like this is a sort of an American courtroom go-to, where you get an expert, especially in medicine, who is European. And the prosecution did this quite masterfully. They got this guy who practices in Minnesota, but he's from, I don't know, Denmark or someplace like that. And he's just this sweet old man. And if he, accidentally interrupts someone, who'll be like, terribly sorry. He's, super polite to everybody. And they got him...
He's from the Minnesota of Europe.
Yeah. Yes, it's a perfect witness for Minnesota, and he was just like, this happened because of Chauvin's knee on the neck. There's no other way around it. But then the defense they have their witnesses this week, and one of the guys they drag up is one David Fowler, who comes from Maryland. He was the chief medical examiner for the state of Maryland, and his argument is basically that George Floyd died from any number of things, none of which were Derek Chauvin's knee. And he goes out of his way to say, it could have been carbon monoxide because he was right next to a tailpipe.
How could it have been carbon monoxide?
That's a great question.
He's outside.
Well, his argument is it was right next to a tailpipe. And so the prosecution, Blackwell, did a great job nailing him down on this. It was like, okay, was the car on? And he's like, I don't know. And that's the thing that struck me about it, was because they get this guy, and he sounds, to an American such as myself, I was like, I guess he's British? I was like, no, that sounds kind of Australian. And this is a guy who, when he was the chief medical examiner of Maryland, has basically done the same exact thing for the Freddie Gray case. He did the same, very similar for Anton Black, who was a 19-year-old who died was killed a couple years ago by a knee on the neck from a cop, and he did the same exact thing. He even was complicit in like manipulating evidence and got sued for it. And then he retired, and now he's a witness for a case in Minnesota. An expert witness. And they got him to admit, I'm part of a business, that I do this for a living. And I was wondering, like, where's this guy's accent from? It's like kind of sounds British, kind of sounds Australian. Then I look him up, and what do you know? He is a white South African. Big surprise.
Convict now.
Yeah. So that's what the defense is kind of trying to rest on, is they got this like probably pro-apartheid South African guy who's been a medical examiner, and he's trying to convince people that it didn't have anything to do with Derek Chauvin. He's saying, like, well, his weight is only 140 pounds. Okay, they ask him, did you take into account the Kevlar vest and all the guns and shit he was wearing? Did you factor that into the weight? And he was like, no, I did not.
Oh, no, I was just hoping I could be racist.
Yeah. So I think...
It works at home.
Yeah. I just don't know how... I don't know how Chauvin is going to get off with this, but they are preparing in Minnesota. It feels like last year they just didn't expect this to happen, right? There's a pandemic going on. There's another police killing, and all of a sudden people are burning down the police precinct. And that starts a precedent for people in America who are seeing this and thinking like, oh, we could just do that. Holy shit. So now they're already dispatching the National Guard because of Dante Wright to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, and they're like stopping people at gas stations, and they're just like getting ready, and they want to just like be basically do a preemptive strike on anyone who's going to protest what could be a not guilty verdict. So it's going to be pretty brutal. I mean,
it's April, folks.
Yeah, it's something about spring.
It's not even hot yet.
I don't know what it is, but this time it's weird that this is happening 2 years in a row, where in like spring all of a sudden like cops just get, I don't know if we're filming it more, noticing it more this time of month or time of year, but the cops are doing more killing and assaulting in the spring during COVID. It's strange how that happens 2 years in a row, but I think they are bracing for a serious riot. Although, I mean, if I had to guess, I don't think Chauvin is going to get off. So I don't know what's going to happen then, but it'll be interesting to see.
It is fun to just remember that the world of Law and Order makes more sense than the one we actually live in. And I have no idea how this is going to end. So we'll keep checking back in on that. And yeah, that's the high note at the end of the episode. Leslie, thanks for coming on. Where can our listeners find you? You're a star.
Thank you so much. You can find me on Struggle Session, patreon.com/struggle session, or sesh.plus.
Nice.
I'll see you on sesh.plus. I'm on Twitter at Patak Jokes. I'm thinking about changing my name. I haven't done stand-up in like a year. I think I might be Patak Poems. I might go back to Patak Test Kitchen, where I'm whipping up all my hot recipes in the test kitchen. Send me your recommendations. Who knows what the name's going to be. Anders, what about you?
At Anders Lee here on Twitter. Check out my other job at Redacted Tonight. You can watch on YouTube or portable.tv. And I'm going to send something to that we'll link to in the show notes about how you can help get food to people in Brooklyn Center, because they need help right now. We'll put that in there. Bum bum.
Hell yeah, baby. That's us for another week. It's finished.
It's finished.